All right, good morning, y'all. Thanks for coming to our meeting. We're going to talk about, based on our interview from the other day, we're going to talk about professional development in your area of formative assessment. So these are our norms as we have for every meeting. I should make you guys a copy just to remind you. We're going to ignore the roles and responsibilities today because we don't really have any group activities to work on. So I'm going to start first with book study. And that is from this book called What Successful Science Teachers Do by Paige Keeley. So I made you a copy of the section on science assessment. I didn't read on page 125 where it says highlights and the findings of this report. And what do you guys think about what research is clear about formative assessment and embedded instruction? The quote says, the research is clear that formative assessment or assessment that is embedded in instruction has been shown to have a positive effect on student learning. However, teachers often exhibit several weaknesses in their formative assessment practice, including emphasizing questions that focus on superficial rather than higher level learning. So what do you think we could do to focus on higher level learning more than superficial?
Maybe plan out questions and start with maybe some of the superficial stuff to make sure that they get the basic concepts, and then plan things that are higher.
So more of like a scaffolding. Okay.
Scaffolded up.
More authentic lesson where it's talking about where the questions line up more directly with what we're doing than just going through because this is the prescribed thing we have to do.
Right, so don't just grab pre-made questions and try to fit our curriculum to it, but make sure our questions fit our curriculum. All right, so then look at the second paragraph where it says the students first worked independently to respond to a prompt and then followed by a whole class discussion. So we've been working on formative assessment and we've mostly done independent. So how do you think we could move to the whole class formative assessment? And when do you think it would be appropriate to use individual and whole class?
What generally happens in my classes, even if I'm picking out who to answer, the no opt-out turns into extremely long pauses because they still refuse to answer.
Right.
So you have to then get someone else to help them. And so
Phone
then they just verbatim repeat what the other kid said just so they get to move on to the next person.
Right.
So
what I normally do is if a student doesn't know, I'll tell them I'll come back to you. And
right.
I'll come back to you maybe with this question or with another question.
Right.
And that'll give them time to look over their notes or look over, what we've been talking.
Handouts and systems.
Yeah, I've done that with a lot of ELL kids or STED kids.
Yes.
To try to
Here's how you respond to a question.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, to have them for something more general like that.
Yeah, I have a prompt poster in my room, and I mostly just use it for writing. I've never thought about using it for speech and answering classroom questions. So that maybe we could develop something like that and get Jill or somebody to print us a poster so we can put up in our room. All right, so that's my part. Now it's going to be Melissa's turn.
So we're talking about success criteria. I think some of the things that we've talked about here are things like quality questioning and how do we formatively assess kids and figure out whether or not they actually have the information. So I kind of gave you some different ideas for formative assessments that we could use to develop that success criteria. The big idea, I thought that was kind of neat because it's kind of helping the kids have a target on what their ideas are. In the center, they're supposed to put what the big idea is, and they could do this both collaboratively and as a self-check. Then they're supposed to, in the next circle out, put what's important to know and why. And then the last one were terms that they might be familiar with that are associated with. And so how do you think that this would help kids and help us really assess kids' learning and whether or not we're ready to test them on content?
I think they'll be able to see any misconceptions pretty quickly. If they're not able to make connections or put things in the right boxes, or if they're misusing words.
Now we've done 3-2-1s before. But I kind of like that on this one, they had to explain their answer a little better. So instead of them just saying, 3 things I learned, 2 things I don't understand, 1 thing I wonder about, they actually have to explain a little more depth. I think that, an improved 3-2-1 might help.
anytime they have to explain it, it takes away the guesswork. That they can guess B and go on.
Okay.
So it gives you more depth.
Okay. I agree.
And I use the 3-2-1 a lot with like, articles that we read in the classroom, a chance to ask about what we're learning, with that article or topic.
Great. And on part of our success criteria, we're supposed to identify if there are any significant numbers who are not yet on performance. So like, how could some of these examples help us with that?
I think the task that you have them do could be related to whatever that criteria is that they need to work on or target,
Mhm.
and then that you could maybe use to like show growth or just as an actual student example of what they do know.
Yeah. And I like to tie it back to the learning targets, because if we're not telling them exactly what we're looking for, I feel like they don't really know how to answer something, because that's how I feel in professional development and FLC, and sometimes like, what answer are you looking for? Tell me what you want. And so I feel like if we tie it back to a learning target, that would help the kids a lot. And I think one that really helps as far as the success criteria and them coming back to the learning target or the standard, if you look at the very last page, I really like this chain notes. I had not seen this before, but it's a great idea. They have to build upon what the last kid said. And so I feel like that kind of helps them to take other kids' ideas and expand upon it. How do you think that might help them with our success criteria and them learning, truly learning, and us assessing?
I think if they're able to make appropriate connections, they're going to be able to truly have like learned it. If they can actually apply the knowledge in context, that would just demonstrate their actual level of understanding.
Well, if you ask them each individual, they're just going to get a surface answer at first, but every time you make them build on it, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper.
I also felt like this kind of helped us with the misconceptions again, because if you're doing this for the one class and you're reading back through, then we know we can go back to the original learning target and we can reinforce and reiterate before we go to our actual summative assessments. Also a couple examples that I felt like for special ed would be good in ELLs. On page 3, you've got more of the annotated drawings and the card sorts, which I liked a lot, because I know with the ELL students and all the special ed students, that's sort of a struggle. So how do you think that these might sort of help us correlate what we want the kids to
I
learn?
think if you're maybe looking at a more rigorous content, to have that information kind of out there in the card sort, and then to see if they can even appropriately match it, is going to let you see if they understand maybe the big idea, and then you can build on from there to the point that they can apply it to other situations or find those connections.
We're all supposed to infer with this when we're looking at student work, so do you feel like this is a good influence for kids, like they can start to see those bigger connections?
I think so.
I think these were some great examples that I saw in science formative assessments, so I hope that helps.
Okay, hey guys. I've got a way that we can tie back our formative assessments to some of these qualities that we've been looking at. So what I've given you right here is criteria, success criteria check sheet. It's basically taking your learning target and developing explicit criterion on what you want your students to be able to show you about a topic. So if you'll look right here, which we got this in some of our professional development, but we've got FAR, it's formative assessment and results cycle. So you want to be able to communicate success criteria. You want the students to have a very clear understanding of exactly the type of response that you're looking for. So you give students a task during their learning, and then we analyze the work based on pre-established criteria. But we also want to make sure that we do it in a timely manner. We don't wait too long. We want to make it kind of follow up really quickly. Okay? All right, so here's an example, and I gave you this example that we have right here. So if we take this, it says learning target, we are learning to make observations of data, okay? And so our task would be to write 3 observations of the data provided. So went through, and if we were to follow this kind of format, we would just label the explicit things that we want to get out of this meeting. So just what can be seen with no interpretation or explanation, just pure observation, no inferences whatsoever. And then short statements, which of the following communicates a single fact about the data?
and then numbers that quantify the data, and 3 accurate statements about the data. So, and if we were to follow our little graphic organizer that we got here, we would fill this out. So we have, you can go ahead. So if we fill this out, we have our learning target up here, and then our formative assessment. And open response works really well with this because, like y'all were saying, making them explain why and give a justification to what they're thinking. They can't just write something down and say, oh, well, it's not right. Because, you know, we tell our students it doesn't matter if you're right or not, it's do you know why you're right? So they can apply that information later. So what you would do is you would go through at criteria 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can make more if you need it. But you would explicitly put down, all right, I'm looking for this. And you'll take samples, you'll pick out your example of your best data that you got, like, you know, what you consider your quote unquote perfect. And then your kind of mid-level, you know, the student who did okay, didn't quite get everything in the middle of the road. And then you want to pick the ones who struggled the most, who maybe didn't meet any of the criteria that you were looking for. You know, like the ones who will just sit there, who don't want to answer, who don't want to talk, and just like, you know, using up that oxygen. So, once again, we're definitely looking at what do we want to know, what do we want to be able to do. That's what we're going to base our criteria on. How do we know if our students are learning, and how do we know if our students, in the response, can they communicate it well? Okay, so just take a look at this handout. What jumps out at you? And remember, you're not doing this for every single student. You're doing this for just a selected sampling of each high, middle, medium, and low. So on this sheet, what do you think the benefits of this would be for you? How could this help you when you're looking at were they able to do that learning target or not?
It lets you see what parts they get and what parts they don't. Because if you just ask a question blanketly, they may all miss it. They may actually know 80%.
Right, it kind of helps you maybe, you know, zero in on just exactly what part of that standard was
And
being
identify
used.
if there's something you didn't teach right or you may have misrepresented it.
Oh, excellent. That way we can go back and say, oh, I need to fix this. We can revisit it the next day. So how often would y'all do something like this?
I think it'd be good to do once a year at least.
Maybe as a pre-assessment kind of thing, see where they are.
Pre-assessment, mid-assessment.
Kind of could do it anywhere. If you'll look at the second page, right here, it's data-driven dialogue, the note capture. I really like this sheet because it gives you a way to predict. You know, we're all science. We like to say, because when you're writing a test question, like, I wonder how they're going to do. So just take a look at this for a second and tell me if there's any ways that we can improve this, how we could add to it, maybe, you know, modify it a little bit.
Well, are you looking at this as individual student or as?
Purely for your benefit kind of thing. I mean, help you figure out how you could improve your lesson, I guess, would be the best use of this form.
It could be like a structure that if 7th grade science is needed to talk about, you know, this student expectation and what that's going to look like. This is where we can dialogue of, you know, between new teachers and people that have taught it before. To say, hey, these are misconceptions, this is typically what happens, or this is what's looked like.
Yeah, that would be really good, especially those lessons that you feel that you just don't seem to be able to get the kids to get it. You know, we always have those lessons. All right, so especially Drew, you're the king of those Google Docs and stuff. Maybe we could figure out a way to digitize this a little bit better because, you know, it'd be helpful to be able to pull it up for next year or something. So, okay. So, do y'all have any questions for me, Ms. Jones, or Ms. Waddell? Or we good? Any ideas for next time? Y'all can always email me. It'll be cool. All right. Thanks, guys.